faced with no plan B.
It is, and this is where it's interesting you say that, because I had assessed that the main effort was going to come through the east, through the Donbass, because from a military perspective, if you're going to have maximum effect in capturing territory to influence the toppling of a government, then it would have been pushing through the east, where the Ukrainians would have had difficulty because they were keeping some military back for Kyiv and elsewhere. The Russians missed out on that. I think the plan to try and topple the Zelensky government from a pure the intelligence services on the ground to try and identify Zelensky, other key leaders, secure government areas inside Kyiv, while you put an air mobile attack into an airport and capture that airport, bring your airport in, control the area while you're waiting for the ground forces to link up. It's a bridge too far moment type tactic. Unfortunately, the Russian planning didn't go into the detail and overestimated their own capabilities, and grossly overestimated their own capabilities whenever it became apparent that the Ukrainians had been prepared for this to a degree. They shot down a number of the helicopters that were coming in. They managed to have more than just local defence troops. They local defence troops around and managed to push and highly trained Russian paratroopers. Then the Russians lost 2 transport aircraft. They probably lost a battalion or 2 battalions of airborne troops that were due to be air-landed into the secured airfield. And that just took the impetus out of it. Whilst that was happening, the column of armoured vehicles that were coming down, the Ukrainians trained in ambush techniques using British supplied weapons and US supplied weapons, cut the head off the convoy come down, cut the tail off, then just started attacking.
But I do wonder whether fundamentally Russia thought that this wouldn't be a military conflict.
Yeah, I agree.
They thought that the Ukrainians had been Nazified, that they were under a government that was forcing them, therefore they'd welcome the troops in with open arms. And that seems to be the narrative that's played out. And if you believe that, then you would conduct a half-hearted military campaign more to intimidate people. And the moment actually Ukraine steps up with bravery, tenacity, and actually some degree of military capability as well, that's a shock. 40-mile convoy stands still, right target, suddenly there's a rethink moment for Russia.
And again, they got the basics wrong. The route they came down was ideal for getting into Kyiv, but you couldn't manoeuvre off it with armoured capability. So anyone would have realised, and I remember planning for NATO going into Kosovo, and one of the big areas of concern that we had was the main route in going up went through 2 massive tunnel areas that could have been stopped by 2 people in them. They'd have stopped the whole of NATO coming in, which is why we had a massive left hook from the Germans going in through Albania, and the Americans prepared to take a massive right hook if necessary, and that would have gone through Serbia itself. Luckily that didn't have to happen. So a lot of the basic intelligence preparation of battles wrong, and an understanding of the Ukrainian quite clear that they not identify the preparation that's going on. And the SVR is running around Kyiv. Pop up, and all of a sudden they disappear, and they weren't getting the messaging back into the Russian decision making. But again, Putin's sitting in his exalted level behind his great big old desk in Moscow with a very large glass of vodka over in best Russian crystal, with his white cat on his knee, being briefed by everyone saying, of course they're going to give in and everything else. People who work from a hierarchical perspective can easily be misled, and that can lead to consequences further down the line. And the consequences are, from a strategic perspective, Putin has already lost the conflict.
Yeah, so the Battle for Bakhmut was the most bloody battle, I think, since World War II. I think history will judge that about 30,000 casualties. But I think when history books are written about this, it's for 2 reasons. One of them is sons. Okay, so these guys were just thrown at the battlefields. I think that was, and the second one, which I think is also fascinating, is there was some military advice to a war of attrition. A war of attrition is almost medieval. Armies meeting on a preordained battlefield, having a cup of tea, they've got to actually go at each other, and the biggest, strongest survives. Well, if you have the bigger army, that is a battle you're going to win. So don't get drawn into that. And yet, for a matter of pride, it became hugely symbolic, the whole battle for battle. I think, although it started with the main assault in August, it wasn't until so it was something that prevailed on the battlefields. It left the whole place devastated. But strategically, not important. All sorts of things.
So it's interesting. I've got a slightly different take on it, and we both analyse this from our own similar perspectives, and we come up with different ways. I think the battle for Bakhmut highlighted a couple of things. One, inside the Russia, initially when Prigozhin was brought in, it was Putin trying to find a different way of doing things, and giving a sop to Prigozhin, who was his good friend, and giving him something to do inside Ukraine, because I think Prigozhin wanted to maintain that level of influence that's in there. But that created real Shoigu, and everyone in the hierarchy, and those frictions are what ended up in Prigozhin eventually being withdrawn from the area and the attempted coup that we know of. I think from a Ukrainian perspective, the Ukrainians recognised that Bakhmut had become this psychological fixation for the Russians, both from a political perspective, he said he was going to capture it, and from a military perspective, they'd thrown so many resources at it that they thought that by throwing more resources at it in typical Russian or Soviet style, that they'd just break through. From the Ukrainian perspective, they saw it as a perfect opportunity to fix the Russians. They fixed them in place, they fixed them politically, they fixed them militarily. And that allowed the Ukrainians to do something that we haven't given them full credit for. They took a large proportion of their combat prepared troops and put them out into the UK and other Western countries to be trained in new things, to pick up new pieces of equipment, Western tanks, and the fighting against inside it's a crew of 4, not a crew of 3. And as soon as you get changes like that, and you've got changes of tactics and everything else, trying to work with themselves with different equipment and new equipment, and such a variety of equipment, whilst you're in contact with an enemy and a stronger enemy that's pushing forward, you need to create that time. There's a great military activity that we've both been involved in, which is trading spaces. And I think we've got the backward space for the time to allow them to take a big chunk of their military, get them retrained, and get them prepared to go back in again. And when they came back in again, that's when we started to push for this counter-offensive last year.
And that's where, for me, it doesn't quite tie up. I get that logic, but as you say, I think the about Bakhmut and come up with their own ideas about it. We still don't know the Ukrainian period, but many reports suggest they were significant. Did mark the end of negotiating at the beginning because he wasn't for Razumov, who were playing games, going right. Our army effective, throwing criticism at the army, saying I can do it, but actually you can only do it like me. Yeah.